Leonard Ashford was 43 years old, a man who had spent 2 decades in financial services and who understood with professional precision what it meant to build something that held. He ran his mornings on a routine so consistent his coffee finished at the same time his banking app loaded. On a Friday evening in March, his wife of 6 years handed him an envelope with a family law firm's name on the return address. On the following Monday morning, he opened his banking app at 6:22 and looked at two accounts that both read zero, not low, not reduced, zero. She had moved everything, $400 across 3 transactions, while he was working a weekend site review. She had left him the furniture, the car payment, and a note that said she hoped he understood. He set the phone down. He picked up his coffee. He called his attorney. What he did not know yet, what Sandra had no way of knowing, was that 3 days later, a branch manager at the bank where she had moved the money would read the name on the account holder's file and pick up his own phone. And Terrence Haynes had very good reason to make that call. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The early morning was his best time to think, and Leonard Ashford had built his entire professional life around that fact. Leonard had spent his first 12 years in banking, starting as a loan officer at First Regional Bank at 24 and rising to senior vice president of commercial lending by the time he was 36. He had not left because he was asked to leave or because anything had gone wrong. He had left because he had an idea for something different, and he had learned, by 36, that the best time to build something was before you needed to. He had started Ashford Financial Group, a regional financial advisory firm specializing in small business and commercial lending consulting, with 2 clients, 1 assistant, and an office on the 4th floor of a building he had helped finance when he was still at the bank. The firm had grown to 19 clients and a staff of 7. He drove a blue sedan he kept meticulous. He wore a plain steel watch his father had given him the year he made VP, because his father had worked in precision manufacturing for 31 years and believed a good watch was something you kept. Every morning at 6:22 he checked the overnight market summaries and his account balances and his client correspondence in that order. He had done this since his 3rd year at the bank and had never once considered changing the sequence. He was the kind of man who understood that the most dangerous risk in any financial system was the one you had chosen not to read. During his 12 years at First Regional, he had hired and developed more than 30 professionals who had since dispersed across the regional financial industry. Branch managers, compliance officers, senior lenders, a deputy CFO at a credit union. He had written reference letters, made calls, attended promotions, and shown up to the kinds of occasions that mattered. He had never asked for anything in return. That was not how he understood investment. He had met Sandra at a client appreciation event 6 years ago. She was marketing director for a hospitality company that had catered the function, and she had the specific professional warmth of someone who could make a room feel organized without anyone noticing. He had respected the competence of it. He had told himself it was the same discipline applied to a different field. He had been right about the discipline. He had been wrong about what it was being applied to. He did not know then that she had, by the time she handed him the envelope, spent 11 weeks preparing the financial architecture of her departure with the same careful, sequential attention she brought to event production. He had not known because he had not looked for it. He had the instruments. He had not run the scan. The kitchen light was on when he came in Friday evening. Sandra was at the table in her coat, which she had not taken off, which he noticed immediately. She was holding the envelope with both hands, flat on the table in front of her, the way people held things they had decided to set down in a specific way. She had been waiting for him. The particular quality of the waiting was itself information. The still composure of someone who had already moved past the moment they were in and was simply completing a necessary formality. She said she had retained an attorney. She said the marriage had stopped being what either of them needed, and that she had been honest with herself about that for a long time. She said she wanted to handle it cleanly, and she hoped he would too. Her voice had the unhurried precision of something she had said to herself many times until it arrived without roughness. He looked at the envelope. He looked at her coat, still on. He looked at the window behind her, where he could see the edge of her car in the driveway. In the back seat, partially visible through the rear window, was a dark green duffel bag. It had not been there that morning. He noted it. He said nothing about it. He filed it with the same precision he filed everything that told him more than it was intended to. "I'll be in touch through my attorney," he said. She nodded. She seemed briefly unsettled by the simplicity of that. She had prepared for more. He did not give her more. He picked up his jacket from the hook. He went to his office and closed the door. He sat at his desk and looked at the bookshelf across from him, where the original Ashford Financial Group articles of incorporation sat in a clear frame, the kind of framing you did with a document when you wanted to remember what the beginning looked like. He had not called Walter Graves yet. He had not done anything yet. He sat for a while with the quality of the Friday evening, and the coat she had not taken off, and the duffel bag in the back seat. He let himself understand what he was looking at. Then he made a list. Then he went to bed. He checked the app at 6:22 on Monday morning. Checking. Savings. 0. He set the phone face down on the counter. He picked it up again. He refreshed. The numbers did not change. He opened the transaction history. 3 transfers executed across 3 separate weekdays over the prior 2.5 weeks, each one below the automatic review threshold. 38,400, 41 200s, 21 800. Total, 101 400s, all moved to an external account he did not recognize. He set the phone down again. He was very careful about the way he set it down. He stood at the kitchen counter for 60 seconds, not because he was shocked, because he was a financial professional, and he understood specifically what he was looking at, and he wanted to be sure he had accounted for all of it before he moved. Then he called Walter Graves. 2 years before that Monday, Leonard Ashford had done something he had never brought up between them. Sandra had been trying to expand her marketing work into independent consulting, client by client, building her own book rather than managing accounts for someone else's firm. She had the instincts for it. What she did not have was bridge income for the first 6 months while the pipeline built. Leonard had restructured their household budget without discussion and had covered the difference himself for the first 7 months. He had not described what he was doing as a sacrifice or an investment or a loan. He had done it the way he did anything that needed doing, quietly, with an accurate understanding of what the situation required, and without needing it to be acknowledged. Her consulting work had taken hold by the 8th month. She had 3 clients by the end of the year and had not needed bridge income since. There was a woman named Frances Hayward, 65, retired from 30 years in banking compliance, and a member of the same regional financial literacy coalition Leonard had served on for a decade, who had said to him once, over coffee after a board meeting, "You know what I've watched you do? You make careers look easy when they happen near you. That's a rare and dangerous quality." He had asked what she meant by dangerous. She had looked at him steadily. "People in your orbit get comfortable," she said. "They don't always notice how much of the structure is coming from you." He had thought about that more than once. He had noticed in the 18 months before the Friday envelope a growing distance in how Sandra engaged with his work and with the decisions he made. Not anger, not argument, just a recalibration of interest, the subtle reorientation of someone who had begun to look towards something else. He had told himself it was the natural drift of 2 people with separate professional lives and demanding schedules. He had extended that interpretation further than the evidence held. That was what she hadn't understood. Until the Monday the accounts read 0. Her name was Frances Hayward. She was 65 years old, a retired compliance director who had spent 30 years at the regulatory and institutional intersection of banking, fraud detection, and consumption. She was compact and meticulous, silver-haired, with reading glasses on a chain, and the specific economy of motion of someone who had spent 3 decades doing precise work in environments where imprecision had consequences. She called Leonard on the Wednesday after the Monday. She did not ask how he was doing. She said she had been in contact with some people, and she had something to show him and he should eat first. He met her at her kitchen table at 8 a.m. She was already at it, with a folder organized with the precision of a woman whose career had been built on the assumption that documentation was the only thing that held when everything else was contested. "I want to walk you through what I found," she said. "In the order it matters. I need you to let me get through all of it." The first section was the transaction history she had already assembled through professional channels, a more complete version of what he had seen in the app. 3 transfers, yes, but she had also found a 4th transaction, an early withdrawal from a retirement account in his name, processed through a financial institution he had opened the account with 14 years ago, amount $28,000. The signature on the authorization form was not his. He had not been contacted. He had not been present. Leonard looked at the withdrawal form. He looked at the signature. She had access to the account information through joint tax filings. Frances said, "That is likely how she knew the account existed. The withdrawal was processed without two-factor verification because the institution does not require it for withdrawals under $30,000. She said this without editorializing, just the mechanism. I want you to know this is documentable and recoverable." "There's more," Frances said. She placed the second document on the table, a personal loan application submitted in Leonard's name at a third institution for $15,000. The application was still in processing review. It had not been approved yet. It had not been denied yet. The application contained a forged signature and income documentation that had been altered. Leonard sat with both documents for a moment. He set his mechanical pencil flat on the table, the one he kept in his breast pocket, the habit from years of annotating financial documents in the margins. He set it down without writing anything. "She moved everything to an account at First Regional Bank," Frances said. "Riverside branch." She looked at him over her glasses. "I thought you should know the location specifically." Leonard looked at her. The Riverside branch. He knew that branch. He had helped open that branch. He had overseen the original staff build-out from his senior VP position. He had hired a 22-year-old teller named Terrence Haynes for that branch in what had been, at the time, Terrence's first professional financial services position. He had trained him, promoted him twice, written his reference letter when he applied for an officer's track role, and attended the branch manager announcement dinner 8 years later. He had not processed any of this yet. He was processing it now. "Did you know?" Frances asked. "No, Leonard's." He stood from the table. He went to the window. He stood there long enough to account for what the information meant and what it did not mean, and what it was neither his place nor his intention to ask of someone who had built their career legitimately and well, and who owed him nothing. He came back. He sat down. He looked at the full picture on the table, the transactions, the retirement withdrawal, the loan application, the branch address, the way he looked at a full financial model, every line connected to every other line, every number in its correct position. He could see the whole shape of it. "I need to call Walter," he said. "I know," Frances said. She refilled his coffee without being asked and said nothing further. He didn't move fast. That's what people never understand about this part. Walter Graves had been Leonard's attorney for 9 years, and he was the specific kind of attorney who returned calls before 6:30 a.m. and who understood that documentation was not a response to a problem. It was the permanent record of what actually happened, which was a different and more important thing. He reviewed Frances's full compilation on Wednesday afternoon and called Leonard at 6:11 Thursday morning. "The retirement account withdrawal is fraud," Walter said. "Clear, documentable, recoverable. The loan application is attempted fraud. It hasn't cleared, which means we can stop it, and which means it's evidence of intent as much as the completed withdrawal." He paused. "The joint account transfers are legally more complicated, but the transfer pattern, 3 tranches, each below the review threshold, executed while you were traveling, will be relevant to any contempt or dissipation of assets motion." "What do I file first?" Leonard said. "A temporary restraining order on all marital assets," Walter said, "including her new account. I'll have the filing ready by end of day. We get the hold in place before she moves the money again." The TRO was filed Thursday at 4:47 p.m. The court processed it Friday morning. It was delivered to First Regional Bank's Riverside branch at 10:22 a.m. Terrence Haynes received the order. He read the account holder's name. He read the account number. He looked at the order and then at his records for 30 seconds. Then he processed the hold with the specific, unhurried thoroughness of a man who understood that doing something correctly was not the same as doing it quickly, but that they were not incompatible. The hold was confirmed at 11:07 a.m., 45 minutes from delivery to confirmation. Standard processing time for that type of order was 2 to 3 business days. He called Leonard at 11:14. "I want to be clear about what I can and can't say," he said. His voice had the careful professionalism of someone who knew exactly where the line was. "I can tell you the instrument was received and processed according to protocol. I can tell you should stay in close contact with your attorney." A pause. I just wanted you to hear it from someone you knew. Leonard said. Thank you, Terence. Sir, Terence said. Leonard ended the call and sat at his desk. He thought about a 22-year-old teller who had been nervous about the loan documentation flow on his first week and who had stayed 2 hours after close to get it right rather than ask for help on a system he didn't yet understand. He had noticed that then. He had noted it. He didn't move fast. That was the thing she had never thought to calculate about him. She had spent 6 years deciding that Leonard Ashford was a man who managed money for other people and went home at a reasonable hour and was, in the final assessment, ordinary in the ways that mattered most to her. She had decided this without ever looking carefully at the network he had built over 2 decades, not a financial network, not an asset network, but a network of people whose careers existed in their current form because he had been present and specific and reliable at the moments that shaped them. She had walked $101,100 into the middle of that network and had not once wondered whose hands were on the other side. He called Sandra on the Thursday after the Monday. His voice was even and cooperative, the tone he used in negotiations where he needed the other party to believe the result was still open. He said he wanted to resolve the financial matters without extending the litigation. He said he thought they could be reasonable. She agreed before he had finished the sentence. He said Walter would be in touch about the meeting. He ended the call. He made a note. He picked up the articles of incorporation from the shelf, the framed document, the one that showed the beginning, and looked at it for a moment. He put it back. Walter Graves had reserved the conference room on the 8th floor of his building for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday in April. Leonard arrived 38 minutes early. He had always arrived before the room filled. In commercial lending, the party who arrived last to a restructuring meeting was already behind on the terms. The room was clean and well lit with a window looking east over the financial district. Leonard sat at the near end of the table and opened the folder Walter had prepared and went through it once, all the way through, without stopping. He had read it 4 times before. He read it once more. He closed it. Walter arrived at 9:31. Frances Hayward arrived at 9:38, her folder organized and tabbed and ready, and sat near the window without speaking. Sandra arrived at 10:03 with her attorney, a man named Costello. She was composed, moving with the assurance of someone who had done her planning and expected the room to confirm it. She glanced at Leonard once, brief, professional, and sat across from him. Costello opened by noting that his client was prepared to discuss a full and equitable settlement and had proposed a division of marital assets that reflected both parties' contributions. He placed his asset schedule on the table. It listed the furniture, the vehicle, a modest figure for joint savings, a savings figure that reflected, Leonard noted, the balance before the 3-week transfer sequence. Walter looked at the schedule for 4 seconds. Before we address the proposed division, he said, there are several matters that require the record's attention. He opened his folder. He began placing documents on the table. The first was the transaction history, the 3 transfers, the dates, the amounts, the recipient account. He read the total, $101,400. He noted the transfer pattern, 3 tranches, each below the automatic review threshold, executed across 3 weekdays over a 22-day period while Leonard was traveling for client work. These transfers were executed without the account co-holder's knowledge or consent, Walter said. They are the subject of a dissipation of marital assets motion already filed with the court. Costello was writing. He had shifted forward slightly in his chair. Walter placed the second document, the retirement account withdrawal form. He noted the date, the amount, $28,000, and the signature. Mr. Ashford did not authorize this withdrawal. He was not contacted by the institution. The signature on the authorization form is not his. He placed the forensic signature analysis beside it. This has been submitted to the relevant institution and to the court. Something moved across Sandra's face. Not fear exactly. The expression of someone who had calculated the room before entering it and was discovering in real time that the room contained more than the calculation had accounted for. Walter placed the third document, the personal loan application, submitted in Mr. Ashford's name, forged signature, altered income documentation. The application is in suspension pending this proceeding and law enforcement notification. He set the application flat. The total amount sought fraudulently across these 3 instruments, $144,400. Costello set down his pen. He looked at his client. She was not looking at him. Walter placed the 4th document, the T-Row confirmation from First Regional Bank Riverside Branch. The account balance as of confirmation date froze the processing time 45 minutes. The temporary restraining order on all marital assets was granted by the court on Friday, Walters said. It was delivered to the relevant branch and processed the same morning. He folded his hands on the table. The assets are currently held and will remain so through the conclusion of these proceedings. Costello said carefully, "We'll need time to review." "Of course," Walters said. "Take all the time you need." The room was quiet. The specific stillness of a proceeding where the documentation had said everything that needed to be said, and both sides of the table understood it. Leonard looked at Sandra. He had not looked at her during the presentation. He looked at her now. He held it long enough for her to understand that the Friday envelope and the Monday zero balance and the 3 careful transfers had all moved in a direction she had not accounted for. He held it long enough for her to understand that the branch where she had opened the account was not a random branch. Then he was done. He stood. He picked up his folder. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at Sandra, and he said it the way he said everything that was simply a fact, without volume, without cruelty, just stated accurately. "I hired Terrence Haynes as a teller at 22, he said. "He processed that hold in 45 minutes. You couldn't have chosen a worse branch." He shook Walter's hand. He shook Francis's hand. He walked toward the door. He stopped briefly in the doorway. He didn't look back. He spoke toward the window. "He's a good branch manager," Leonard said. "I should know. I wrote the letter." He walked out. It did not happen all at once. The fraud findings were referred to the appropriate authorities. Walter managed the scope carefully, what was named and what was not named, what the record required and what it could be allowed not to require. Leonard had not asked for more than the record demanded. He had asked only that the record be accurate. The retirement account withdrawal was reversed in the 9th week after the hold was confirmed. The loan application was canceled, and the relevant institutions were notified. The dissipation motion was resolved in Leonard's favor as part of the final settlement, which required the return of the transferred funds and an equitable division of actual marital assets. The process took 5 months. It was not pleasant. It was documented. Sandra's events consulting firm continued. She was not financially destroyed. She had her own income, her own work, her own professional identity that she had built genuinely and that Leonard had never wanted to diminish. The settlement reflected what the law required when a person had taken what was not theirs, and the record had been correctly assembled. That was all Leonard had wanted. Just the correct record. He had 4 clients at Ashford Financial Group now, who had been referred by former colleagues at First Regional. A 5th was coming on in the spring. He answered every inquiry the same day and gave accurate assessments and stood behind them. Francis Hayward sent him something in the mail 14 months after the settlement. No note. A small plant in a plain ceramic pot, the kind that grew without complaint in less than ideal conditions, and had a reputation for outlasting the other plants on the shelf. He set it on the windowsill in his office, beside the framed articles of incorporation. He watered it on Thursdays. Terrence Haynes stopped by the office one afternoon that November. He had been attending a regulatory compliance seminar 3 blocks away and had an hour. He sat in the chair across from Leonard's desk, and they talked about nothing for 20 minutes and about the industry for another 20. Before he left, Terrence looked at the framed document on the shelf. He looked at it for a moment. First Regional thing turned out all right. He was not asking about the legal matter. He was asking about Leonard, whether he was all right. That was how Terrence asked things. "It turned out correctly," Leonard said, which is the same thing. Terrence stood. He shook Leonard's hand. He said he'd reach out about the new commercial lending program he was running at the branch. Leonard said he'd be glad to look at it. Terrence went down in the elevator, and Leonard heard the building settle back into its morning quiet. On a Tuesday morning in late November, Leonard Ashford arrived at his office at 6:19 and made his coffee, and sat at his desk and opened the banking app the way he had opened it every morning for 20 years. Checking, savings, the client trust accounts, the firm operating account, all of it in its correct order, each figure where it was supposed to be. He closed the app. He reached up and straightened the frame on the shelf, the articles of incorporation, slight tilted from where someone had bumped the shelf the week before. He straightened it until it was right. He looked at his name on the document. He looked at it the way he had looked at it the morning he had first put it in the frame. Not with pride exactly. but with the quiet recognition of someone who had built a thing correctly and knew it. The morning was clear. The market summaries were waiting. He had a client call at 8. He put down his coffee. He picked up his pencil. He got to work. His name was on the account. It had always been on the account. In the morning, and every morning after, he would continue to build. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.